The reason I always say to people, start, is because the hardest part is the beginning. My dad used to say to me, you will always be the worst at something the first time you do it. Anytime I find myself stuck now, I recognize that often the reason I'm stuck is because I'm focusing on the output and I'm not focusing on my input.
A business is an instrument for the work. It's not the purpose for existing.
Need motivation?
Watch the Top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like 9 to 9. For my top 10, top 10, 9 to 9. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Vusi Thembekwayo, and my take on his top 10 rules for success. Enjoy. Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Make a commitment.
If you study people who are at the pinnacle of anything, you recognize that to get there, motivation was maybe 1% of the formula. Maybe. 1%. And I'll prove it to you. If you want to become a world-class bodybuilder, say an IFBB pro, what that takes is you have to train twice a day, 6 days a week. You have to have 8 meals a day. Your calorie intake is regimented. Your meals are pre-planned and pre-cooked. You don't eat according to taste, you eat according to function. So my trainer, for instance, will eat and I'm going, what are you eating? And he's having he'll have chicken that was boiled without salt. And he'll have like half a kilo of it. I mean, what are you doing? He says, I'm taking in protein. He doesn't say I'm eating, he says, I'm taking in protein. For him, it's functional, it's not taste-based. Then, you will probably have to train for a minimum, and this is if you are a genetic phenom, you'd have to train for a minimum of 10 years before you could get on a stage and compete at an average level with an average global bodybuilder. Average. Okay. So why am I telling you this? All of us here at the beginning of a new year write these things called New Year's resolutions. And then New Year's resolutions, number 1, make more money. Yeah? Number 2, change my boyfriend. Number 3, get into shape. Yeah? Number 3, get into shape is somewhere in the top 3. So what do? You go to the gym, you get a gym membership. Yeah? You go to the local Nike store and you buy like all of your gym gear. You are motivated. You are inspired. You are going to the damn gym. You go to YouTube, you subscribe to all of the fitness channels. You go to your Instagram, you follow all of the fitness models. You are motivated. You are going to the damn gym. You're going to get in shape. That's what you're going to do. The people you're following on YouTube have been working out for a minimum of 5 years to look like that. So you have the incorrect understanding that after a month of working out, you're going to look like them. So what happens in the first month? You're excited. You go to gym every single month. And you take the pains and your body is sore, but I'm excited. I'm going to gym. Then life happens. Company doesn't make money. You don't make your targets. You fall a bit ill. Something happens. And all of a sudden, you stop going to gym for a day. A day becomes 2, 2 becomes a week. Now all of a sudden, you've had a gym membership for 3 months and you haven't been in that time. What did you miss? You thought motivation was the formula. Winners don't need motivation. Winners need discipline. Discipline's about getting it done because it needs to get done, not because I feel like it, not because I'm motivated for it. You think Nelson Mandela was motivated to spend 27 years in prison? You think Martin Luther King was motivated to march across the states and proclaim freedom? You think, if you look at people that change the world, they're not doing it because they're motivated. They're doing it because they made a commitment to do it and they disciplined to see it through. Discipline is far more important than motivation, which is why you've got to be careful the decisions you make, because once you make the decision, you have to see that decision through. Like my mentor says, first we make the decisions, then the decisions make us. So you got to be very careful the decisions you make. Be very careful the commitments you make. Motivation, I'm telling you now, is completely overrated. It's important. Don't get me wrong. You know, we meet according to motivation. We feel good, rah-rah. But that'll fade. You need a stronger will and a deeper commitment to see things through.
Rule number 2, get started.
The single most important part of the momentum equation is movement, right? So I'll give you an example. Here's how I explain this to people. So if you're driving your car and for some other strange reason, you know, the car stalls and you're stuck, right? You have one of two things you can do, right? And let's imagine you're in a, cell phone black zone. You can't phone anybody. You get one or two things you can do. Sit in the car, switch on your hazards, and pray somebody's going to come past you. That's what we call the charity approach. Hi, I'm here. I grew up poor. I didn't get a good education. Help. It completely gives the power to the person on the other side of the equation, which is I feel like I want to help, and here's how much I'm willing to help with. All right? Flash the hazards. The alternative is you open the driver's door, you drop the handbrake, you put your shoulder behind the chassis, and you push. Now, when you start pushing, the hardest part is going to be that initial meter, because the car is completely still. It's got no momentum. So you start pushing. And what happens is 5 meters down the line, 10 meters down the line, assuming the road is flat, of course, all of a sudden you're not pushing as hard as you were, you're just maintaining momentum. So the reason I always say to people, start, is because the hardest part is the beginning. My dad used to say to me, you will always be the worst at something the first time you do it. So the results you get the first time you do it are not the true results. That was the worst version of you doing that thing. That's the first time you sing, first time doing public speaking, first time you try to do a comedy set. First time you do anything is the worst time because you don't have the skill set. But as you do it, what happens is you mature, you get better, and you learn, right? So that's what I mean by that is the reason it's important to start is because all of those stories, that self-narrative that you've been saying and toiling in your head, the excuses are valid, the world isn't fair, but guess what? At the beginning, it is going to be tough, but the only way out of it is to start. There is no other way out of it. You can't negotiate with it, right? It's let me just one last thing for you to think about. So I said this to an entrepreneur literally today who came to see me about this very thing. And she was saying to me, look, business, it's COVID, it's been a tough time, yada, yada. And I said to her, if you went to, imagine, the Empire State Buildings. I said to her, if you went to the top of the building and stood at the ledge, prayed to whichever God you praise, God, Buddha, Allah, and told them that you don't believe in gravity and jumped, you'd find that gravity believes in you, right? So I was saying to her, the environment in the moment we're in is gravity. You can't negotiate your way out of it, right? What you can do is you can get started with who you need to be to survive this moment. And what she was doing, which is what I think a lot of people do, is they hang on to who they used to be, right? So I used to be well, that's not working anymore. So who do you need to be? And get started on that journey. I really, honestly, firmly believe in the school of starting. Starting, I think, is often more important in the entire momentum construct than everything that comes after that.
Rule number 3, practice.
The first thing I say to anyone who says, I want to become a speaker, is it's like wanting to become a singer. Sing, right? So the practice and the iteration is the single most important. Mina, when I started, I did a lot of work pro bono. So I'd get invited by Rotary clubs and I'd go and speak at places because I wanted to get into the application of the skill so I could get better at it, right? So there is a difference between being a paid speaker and a speaker. So the first thing I say to people is just speak. If you get invited to speak at your kids', graduation ceremony, go. If you get invited to speak at church, do it. If you get invited to MC a friend's wedding, do it. Start practicing this thing you want to do.
Rule number 4, change the brand.
Typically, when we're in business, there are some service lines or product lines which make more margin, more profit than others. So the natural proclivity for business leaders is to focus on the service lines that make more money and kind of abandons the ones that don't. And in the US, General Motors, Daimler, Chrysler, and a couple of other players who were making very big, what they call trucks in the US, these very big cars, Jeep, right? And they were making a lot of money on the big cars. And then on the small cars, they were making a little bit of money.
Yeah.
So they thought, well, you know, and then Toyota came into the US, and Toyota started selling cars in the US, and they were competing with these companies on the small cars. And all of them, General Motors, Jeep, Ford, were like, yeah, it's too little profit. So we leave it, and we let Toyota do it. It's the biggest mistake I watch entrepreneurs make, and business leaders make it too.
Sure.
It's called seeding market in areas that are non-core. And what you do is, if you seed market in areas that are non-core, you give your competitor time to breathe and room to grow. Because then what happens is Toyota now owns that area of the market without competition. Which means even if they make a tiny bit of margin, they don't have to worry about a competitive short-term dynamic. So immediately what happens is they start thinking differently. They start investing more money.
And then they build capital to take you on in another area.
And you know where they'll go? Because it's the innovator's dilemma. They don't make enough margin here. So where will they go? They go up. In other words, you left them in a small space to focus on the big space. What you didn't realize was you were giving them room to build up capital so they can fight you in the big space. So Toyota starts migrating up, right? So Toyota starts making bigger cars. They do it first with what was called a Sienna. Then they made the Camry, which we know in South Africa very well. They made the Cressida, which we know in South Africa very well. And all they were doing was they were migrating up to larger cars. Now, the problem with Toyota was they were making their cars in Japan, exporting them to America. And for the American person, or the average US person, it was still a Toyota. It represented reliability and quality, but it didn't quite represent opulence and luxury. And they were making really good cars. So one day, the story is told like fable, but they're sitting in a board meeting. And one day they're having a conversation about what are we going to do with this problem? And they thought the problem was about pricing. And out of nowhere, a little voice from the back said, this is not a pricing problem, it's a brand problem. We've built a brand that represents one thing. We have a market that associates our brand with one thing. We're trying to sell them something different. So we should just, rather than change the car, just change the logo on the car.
So that even if the car is amazing and brilliant and it fights the Mercedeses and the BMs,
100%.
The fact that it's still called a Toyota,
it's a Toyota,
is what's stopping us. So let's change it.
You know how you know when you're driving the wrong car is if I ask you what car you drive and you tell me the derivative, not the brand. So if I said, what do you drive? You drive GT, you say I drive a GD86. You don't tell me I drive a Toyota Coupe.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because the person who drives an Aston Martin doesn't go, I drive a DB9 or a Vanquish. He asks, what do I drive? I drive an Aston Martin.
I drive a Bentley.
Do you get it? I drive a Bentley. I don't need to tell you if it's a Mulsanne or if it's Continental or it's a Bentley.
Okay, so you say a little voice in the boardroom spoke up.
So the voice says, change the logo. And they go, what do we call it? Well, and they go through this process. And the answer was, what is it? It's a luxury product. What do? We export it. And to whom? To the US. So what is this thing? It's a luxury export to the US.
Lexus.
It's a Lexus. We'll just call it a Lexus. And they created the brand Lexus. And now today, Lexus is the third largest luxury brand in the US.
Thinking simply, using what you have, and keeping your eye on the prize.
I watch entrepreneurs make this mistake all the time. They don't win market share. They think the problem is the product. Sometimes the problem is what people think the product is. You just got to change the brand of the product. The thing's fine, it works. You get an HP and an Apple do exactly the same thing, right? But you pay a 40% premium on the other because you associate something with the brand.
Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, check out my 254 series where every day for the next 254 days, I will send you an unlisted video. The science says it takes up to 254 days of consecutive action to build a habit. So I'm going to be with you every step of the way. If you want to be on for free, 100% free, is a link below. Go check it out. I'll see you there.
My very first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I want to get my head right. I do this thing called priming.
You have to go build self-confidence.
You were up and dressed and ready to go before your parents were up. You know why? Because you knew something unexpected was going to happen. That's how we should live our lives. Waking up with the understanding to expect the unexpected.
Rule number 5, start with the end in mind.
What I've become very good at, I think, is understanding what you call the golden thread, which is the why for me. And my why always is that I told you this last time we spoke, is I'm an elevate guy. So I'm not the person you bring in when you want somebody to steady the ship. I'm the guy you bring in when the ship is a bit too steady and you want somebody to F things up and you want to elevate people's level of ambition, their drive, their goals. I do it in different ways, whether I'm on a platform speaking or I'm writing a book or I'm investing in an entrepreneur. Whatever I do, if the minute I get involved, the outcomes get elevated because that's what I bring, right? And so I think it's important for people to, rather than ask the question, should I focus on one thing or do many things? The question should be, what do I want to be in my eulogy? When I'm no longer here and somebody's standing in front of my peers and friends and haters, and they're telling the story of my life, what do I want them to say? Because usually what you'll notice is if you start with the end in mind, then your purpose becomes very clear. You know, you'll write down the stuff that matters to you just instinctively. I want people to say that I did X and I did Y and I did Z. Well, then do X and Y and Z. That's the stuff you should be focusing on.
Rule number 6, focus on the input.
My dad did a style of martial arts called Kyokushinkai. And I suppose as a little boy trying to get close to dad, I was like, well, if he's doing it, I'm going to join him. So my dad and I shared this incredible passion of martial arts and cars, right? So I kind of get started, you know, with my father. Then he gets gunned down when I'm 13 years old. And I went through like a year of just nothing. I couldn't show up at the dojo. I didn't have it in me. And I did all the things we're talking about. The excuses. At the time, South Africa had a particularly high crime problem. And I was like, you know, what's the point? You know, here's a first-degree black belt who gets attacked. Takes 9 bullets and he's dead anyway. Why am I going to this thing called the dojo, right? Again, excuse is valid. It really is. But there's no progress. So a year, nothing. And then I was like, I actually miss it. So I went back. It was interesting when I went back, it wasn't the same. I wasn't doing the kata to impress the senseis anymore. I was doing the kata because I wanted every single movement to be as close to flawless as I could get it. It changed my entire perspective. So, and one of the things that happened, you're going to love this. I'm literally getting chills thinking about it. One of the things that happened is time just expanded. So, because we have a very finite construct of time, I'm going to be at the dojo for an hour. But what happened was that hour felt like 5 hours, and sometimes 30 minutes felt like 5. All of a sudden, this fixed construct of time, you know, it started to change because my relationship with what I was doing changed. So it wasn't just a punch. It wasn't just the kata. I wasn't just showing up for the emotion. I was embedded in every single part of the process. I was looking for growth, for progress, right? I have to tell you that changed my entire life. So anytime I find myself stuck now, I recognize that often the reason I'm stuck is because I'm focusing on the output and I'm not focusing on my input, right? So output, I've got to raise 100 million rand for my business. Output, I've got to get 300% growth for, you know, in customers. Output, I've got to get 25. Yeah, that's all output. But what you got to focus on is input. What are the things I've got to do and how do I do those things intentionally, deliberately, and try to get better every single time, every meeting, every impact conversation with one of my staff members, every engagement with a client or a potential client, every single one of those things. How do I focus on that moment? Because actually the output is a sum total of how those things come about. So when you are at the dojo and you are being graded and you are going through the process of trying to attain your black belt or your brown belt, that's what everybody sees as the output. But what actually went in was that malleable construct of time where you were trying to perfect every single movement.
Rule number 7, study.
The hardest way to create wealth, it's also the most rewarding way to create wealth, but the hardest way to create wealth is to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Because if you follow the flow of the income statement and you see who gets paid first, if you just go through the income, first the suppliers, then you pay your staff, then you pay the government taxes, then you pay the bank interest, then you pay yourself dividends. So the entrepreneur in the business gets paid last. But unless we go through an education system that teaches us these things, what happens is we breed entrepreneurs, you're seeing it now, who think entrepreneurship is instant money. Do you see? Whereas any person who's a real entrepreneur, and I'm not, with respect, I'm not talking about people who pose as entrepreneurs, I'm talking real entrepreneurs, will tell you that it takes a long time and it's very hard. So that's why you need an education for people who want to be an entrepreneur. And it doesn't have to be commercial education. Like you can go study architecture, doesn't matter.
As long as you've studied the discipline
study
of
the thing.
Repetition.
Like study the thing, be in the thing.
Rule number 8, think about the purpose.
You know the mistake we often make, because particularly in South Africa, we love the idea of owning a business, right? True. We don't think about a business is an instrument for the work. It's not the purpose for existing. If you think about it. So if I want to do creative work, say, and I register a business, that there is a COVID doesn't mean I can't do the creative work. It just means I can't operate the business. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So the answer for him might be to think about how does he offer his skills to people who still require his skills without necessarily getting them to sign a contract with his business. It's very big now, right? It's called this thing called the gig economy. So there might be something for him to try. We use it in our firm. There are several like this. There's a platform called TaskRabbit. We use Upwork. And all of those are global platforms where, say, I want a logo designed. I go on it and I say, I need somebody to design a logo.
Yeah.
And it will publish to 10,000 logo designers around the world that Vusi in Joburg needs a logo designed. He's willing to pay $25 an hour. Do you want to bid for the work? So that might be something for him to consider rather than I've started a business, I can't do a website, I can't. He should take his skill and make this skill available on an ecosystem that already exists.
Rule number 9, fail upwards.
We live in a very mechanistic world where people are looking for the formula. That's why I said there's no template to life. People are looking for that formula that it can just play. It's like Excel. You can, there's a formula, you plug in the inputs and out comes the output. So, and that's how people treat wealth. I think people treat wealth and meaning like that. People go, Vusi, you got wealth. What's the formula? There is none. There's a bit of experimentation. There's a plug and a play somewhere. There's something I'm copying from somebody else. I got a board member of mine who said, sometimes you have to case life. I said, what is case? He says, copy and steal everything, right? I was like, wow, it's really, really good, right? So, and there are parts where I'm experimenting new things and trying stuff for the first time, then it works. There are parts where we steal a little bit from somebody else and then that works. Then there are parts where you do both and it fails. But what you're constantly looking for is to fail upward. So that wherever we fail, we're failing at a level different to the level we're trying at. And that's just about move yourself upward to the next level.
And rule number 10, the last one before a very special bonus clip, is change your approach.
99% of the people that want to be the leader and envy the benefits of leadership don't have the mettle of what it takes to lead. That's why leadership is so difficult and so complex. Because when things are easy and times are certain and the direction is clear, it's easy to lead. In fact, you don't even need to lead. Things just kind of take care of themselves. But leaders are leaders and can only emerge as leaders when it's times of strife and difficulty and complexity, right? Maybe think about it this way. Why does the pilot get paid what he gets paid? My view is the pilot doesn't get paid to fly the plane. The pilot doesn't get paid to take off and to land. They've got autopilot now, so the plane can do that itself. But why do you still need a pilot there? And why do pilots still talk about how many hours have you got on the job? Why is that still important? Because as passengers, we take comfort in knowing that if something goes wrong with this plane, if an engine blows up or an engine seizes, or we hit a rough patch of turbulence, the person behind the wheel is going to know what to do. So if you think about that pilot, he's actually getting paid to manage difficulty and complexity. He's not getting paid to take off and land. Anyone can take off and land. It's like anyone can start a business and register and open a bank account and create a website, right? If you're a manager today in a large corporate, anyone can get a team and start giving out and dishing out instructions. But what really makes you a leader is how you step up when it's the time to step up. It's how your energy, your disposition, your approach changes and consistent with the time. Because the other thing leaders do is they act for their moment, right? In times of peace, the general who's the leader in the army acts for the time of peace. And so what he does is he maintains discipline. He ensures that his troops are well trained. He ensures that they've got the armor and that they continue to train and are battle ready all the time. But in times of war, the general gets paid what the general gets paid because somebody has to make the call. Someone has to choose tactics and strategy. Somebody has to say which target gets hit first. And somebody has to be willing to make the difficult decisions. That's why the general is the general. But if you think about it, almost all people that join the army want the rank of general. I'm not sure how many of them want the responsibility. Everybody wants the rank, because he's the general. He gets the respect. He walks in, he's dripping swagoo. You know, his uniform is lined with colors. He's the Makulubas. But when the pawpaw hits the fan, that's when his job starts. And that's the thing about leadership. Leadership starts when it's a time to lead. And until you've had a moment to lead, you can't call yourself a leader, right? And that's why leadership is not positional. You can have the job and still not be the leader. You can have the position and still not be the leader, because leadership is about how we behave and our energy that we bring in and our intensity and our disposition when it's a moment to lead. And it's about knowing this is a moment to lead. It's not a moment to sit back and to wallow and to wait, right? I don't know about you, but for me, that's been very, it's been cathartic almost. The thinking about, why do I face difficulty, strife, and complexity? As an individual, as a father, as a husband, as a son, and as a businessman. Why do I go through difficulty and challenges? And then I realize often it's because those difficulties and challenges are to build me up so that I'm ready for where I'm going. Which is the second thing I wanted to tell you about leadership, by the way, which is this. You could try as much as you want, but you can't be educated into leadership. Leadership is not about qualifications. It's not about education. Leadership is not even about tenure. You could work 20 years, do the same job, and still not know how to lead. Leadership is about growing into and being groomed into the place. So you grow into the place. But how you grow into the place is you have to go through stresses. If you think about the concept of stress, it's like taking a piece of elastic and pulling it. When you pull the piece of elastic, what you do is you stretch it beyond its natural sense of comfort. You stress it, right? Same too with how you build anything, is you have to pull it and stress it beyond its natural place of comfort. That's how it builds leaders, is you have to be stressed and pulled beyond your natural place of comfort so that you can prove that I can operate at level 1, then level 2, then level 3, then level 4, then level 5. I can operate at all these levels and lead because I've been through the challenges of operating at those levels and I've had the opportunity to lead.
Now I've got a special bonus clip that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you watch a video and you get motivated, the science says you have a 35% chance of following through. That's not enough. But when you write down what time, what place, and how you're going to actually take action on it, you jump to 91% chance of following through. And when you have public accountability and you commit to other people that you're going to do it, it jumps to 95% that you will follow through. So I want that for you, Believe Nation. I want to know your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week. Put it down in the comments below so I can celebrate you.
If I took a potato and I put it in the ground, and I gave you another potato and put it in the ground, and you watered your potato twice as much as I did mine, your potato wouldn't grow twice as fast. Because the laws of nature are fixed. Like, I love my son, he's 8, but he has to go through puberty. He can't skip it. That makes sense? So a lot of us try to skip phases of growth because we want to get to the other side. The mistake you make is you don't realize that in that phase of growth is a lesson you've got to learn. So you have to manage your people. Long before you get managers to manage your people. Yeah? Gary Vee calls it being dangerous enough. Dangerous enough means I know each and every single thing about my business that I'm dangerous enough to know when you're bullshitting me. Yeah, but if I start with a business today and then the government agency gives me funding and I employ 100 people, I'm not dangerous enough because I wasn't there. Like, in your business, who wrote the sales process? If it ain't you, there's a problem. You've got to write the sales process. Then you've got to sell it. You've actually got to try it. You've got to sell to the first few customers and test and make sure the sales process works. Because if you don't do that, when you employ 20 salespeople and they're not giving you the numbers, and they give you 1,000 excuses, which all salespeople will do, you're going to believe them. It's only if you go through the process of building it that you go, no man, it's rubbish. What are you talking about?
If you want 10 more amazing rules from Vusi, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
Your reality is your reality. You're not imagining it. You're not imagining that you're poor. You're not imagining that you're left out because you live in a third world country. You're not imagining that you're not getting the right quality of education to make you globally competitive.